Mono White tokens, of course, we just watched it in the hands of Nathan get the job done, moving on to 10-0 for him. For Austin here, 9-1 with the deck, so doing very well with it. Eli Azorius Oculus, not a deck that we've seen that much of this weekend, so it is cool to see Eli doing well with it here, also at 9-1, going deep into the tournament, and it's going to be interesting to see how this strategy fares against the Mono White deck that has just looked so impressive all weekend.
All right, players have given the thumbs up. They are good to go, and we are underway for round number 11. Starting off with an opt for Eli.
Yeah, we're going to see how fast of a draw Eli can have here. No turn 2 chart, of course, means that it is at least going to be a bit slower, except this is the dream. Meticulous Archive, hitting the Oculus off the top and having the helping hand ready. This is as good as it gets here.
Unreal!
The absolute dream is the Meticulous Archive hitting an Oculus off the top.
That was so sick. Carrot cake for Austin Graham here, but Monty, this Eli has just got to be on top of the world right now.
Eli is absolutely on top of the world, especially because Austin did not have a copy of Get Lost here to deal with the Oculus. Lay down arms, won't be able to get rid of it for another turn, which means Eli is at least getting 2 Manifest Dreads out of this and pushing some damage through, and this may be the type of game where Oculus is actually able to race the Sunfall clock here.
Unbelievable. So Oculus and the Manifest token swung in for combat there. Austin Graham down to 15. Sacrifice that bunny in combat. Another Manifest joins the team. Split up here. The play from Austin Graham, but it's going to get countered.
Phantom Interference says no, and that means Eli is able to continue marching across. 9 damage being presented now, and this game is all but over at this point.
Holy cow, blazing fast start for Oculus. Like you said, the dream. We're checking out these Manifest tokens. It's 100!
Yeah, Manifest Dread, one of the coolest face-down mechanics that we've seen in a while, just because it does give you some agency, it does give you more chances, and another Manifest Dread on the upkeep. So this build of Mono White notably has 2 copies to split up rather than 1. So Austin has an out here if he has exactly the second copy of Split Up, but without it, it's just over.
That's game! Eli Swafford takes down the game against Austin Graham here. Unbelievable stuff from the Azorius Oculus player, Monty. That was sick.
Yeah, you can see smiles on both of their faces, but for very different reasons. Eli's smile is like, I just did the most broken thing my deck could do. I am at 9-1, making my way towards a Pro Tour invite, and I just got it done easily. Austin is like, okay, well, what can you do?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, come on, man. That was the god draw.
You just have to shake it off at that point and just be like, all right.
You said it was the most broken thing his deck could do. Is it the most broken thing in Standard you can do?
It's up there. It's really hard to deal with that sort of draw. And unfortunately, Austin didn't have one of the answers that his deck does have available to him in 4 Get Lost. So
yeah,
when that's the case, it's just the case.
What's interesting, too, though, is that split up with the Oculus in play, making those Manifest tokens and they're not tapped. Sometimes it's not 100% the answer you need.
Yeah, it is absolutely not the be-all, end-all. And we saw that in that game, even if Austin had the second copy of Split Up, depending on what that last Manifest Dread was, it could have still not been enough.
Right, exactly. Well, the players are heading into their sideboards here. Let's take a look, though, before we check out the sideboards at the deck list so we can see the entire decks that these players are playing with. Starting things off with Austin Graham. Mono White tokens, like you mentioned, Monty, this was our feature deck from the last round. It looks pretty similar.
Pretty similar, some differences. You see 1 copy of Elspeth's Smite in this main deck. You also see a second copy of Split Up. So some minor changes, but the core of the deck remains the same. Of course, you see the Carrot Cake and the Caretaker's Talent, one of the key cards, Enduring Innocence and Beza, all there in massive numbers. And Fountain Port, one of the great lands that this deck has access to, in addition to Sunken Citadel, giving you that extra mana because you are a monocolored deck, you can use the Sunken Citadel to fuel your Fountain Ports.
Just how good is Fountain Port, Monty? Scale 1 to 10.
It's a really incredible land. It does a lot. The fact that it creates treasure tokens, so it is an extra mana sink for your future turns as well if you're not in the need of creatures. It really does so much.
Let's take a look at the other side of the table. Azorius Oculus in the hands of Eli Swafford. This deck has been around for a hot minute, and it's sweet.
Yeah, it's very sweet. It continues developing. It continues evolving. We saw at the World Championship, Eli Cassis, a fellow
Yes.
Eli/Eli, developed the founding the third path tech that really made that deck look good in his hands. Eli here does not have that, but is going for a slightly different build, but still looks very powerful. And you do even see a Foundations card in Cura the Rising Tide joining this build as a fun of target for those reanimation effects that isn't the Haughty or a Porn Oculus.
I love her, man. She's just great. She makes you an 8/8. That's just like sick.
She's very cool.
All right, so there's a look at the deck lists. Now let's talk about sideboards, if we may. What are these players potentially interested in bringing in, starting with Austin?
I think for Austin's side, you are looking to make sure you don't get run over again. So something like Destroy Evil here is very nice just to make sure that it's dealing with the Oculus. Same with a card like Exercise. Exiling creatures with power 4 or greater means that it is a great answer to the Oculus. So cheap removal that makes sure a game like that previous one doesn't happen again is really nice. Graveyard Hate can be good. A card like Ghost Vacuum, if you have it on turn 1, is going to get the job done here. So as long as you're making sure your opponent isn't able to do the broken plays that they did in the previous game, your game plan can really get off the ground. And once you're not under the pressure of a turn 2 Oculus, your deck should be in a fine position.
Right.
In theory.
In theory. Get Lost, like you mentioned, is a card that Austin has 4 copies of in the main deck of this mono white tokens. If he had it, that would have been an entirely different game. So
yeah, I think you really want to make sure that you are cutting a card like Elspeth Smite that is too conditional and doesn't do enough in this sort of matchup, and you just want your deck to be leaner and very much focused on answering the threats that your opponent is able to put out.
all right, on the other side of things, we have Eli. Now I'm calling him Eli because of Eli, because
That's
he's
on me.
playing this list at the PT. Talk to me about his sideboard.
I think the slam dunk is definitely the negates. You want to make sure that you're not falling prey to those split ups, to Sunfalls, and to the important 1-for-1 removal that your opponent may be bringing, considering with Haughty and with the opponent Oculus, it doesn't take that many attacks to get the job done here. So just using 1-for-1 counter spells for 1-for-1 removal is worth it for Eli because of how much advantage he can gain from an extra turn of attacks or opponent Oculus triggers. After that, things get a little more questionable. I'm not sure if perhaps the Monastery Mentor is where he wants to go. It sort of does more of the same thing, but it also is maybe more of the same thing isn't a bad thing, because all of these cards that are an entire threat in one card may force your opponent to have those answers. And eventually, as we saw in Devin's match the previous round, at some point your opponent will run out of answers.
Right. I was playing against this deck the other day, and they brought in Monastery Mentor against me, and I was like, oh, yeah, that is a card that is very good.
Yeah, still there.
Still around, still kicking, and still taking matches of Magic down. The players have presented their decks to each other, by the way, just resolving mulligans and shuffling each other's lists before cutting.
Yeah, and we will get rid of the sideboard overlay here as the players are within their mulligans. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Eli has kept his hand already, and this is Austin on a mulligan to 6. So the 6 looking better for Austin, and that will get us rolling with Austin Graham on the play here in Game 2.
Eli Swafford up a game over Austin Graham. Both these players 9-1 here in round number 11 of the tournament. Day 2 of action here from Spotlight Foundations in Atlanta, and we are underway in game number 2. God, mana is perfect in Standard these days. Sorry, I just had to say it.
It's been great in Standard for a while. It really does feel like we've been blessed between the era of the Triomes and the new Capenna lands and now into the current format. It does really feel like, yes, we're seeing less 3-color decks, but there's still so much fixing to allow for these 2-color strategies to feel so consistent. Chart
of course here for Eli. Gonna take a look at some cards. And there goes an Oculus in the graveyard.
Ever looming.
Oh, spooky. Enduring Innocence is the play for Austin.
Yeah, Innocence on the battlefield, no sort of graveyard hate or interaction here. So if Eli can just have a helping hand here,
Oh
get the
my
Oculus in play,
god.
the question is, does Austin have something like a Get Lost here now?
And there's the helping hand, and there is the Oculus. We're manifesting dread. What can Austin do? Does he have the answer in hand? We're about to find out.
Yeah, typically you are mulliganing to try to find answers, but you
Oh
also
boy.
can't afford to mulligan too hard. So when you have a hand like this that has an Enduring Innocence into an Overlord, it's not like you have the luxury of being
Right.
able to mulligan past this, especially on the play to 5. But now Eli has the Oculus surviving for a turn.
Yeah, so we've just got Overlord of the Mistmoors there on. It's an impending with got those 2/1 flyers into the air. The sheep gets in for a lifelinking attack. Austin Graham at 22, Eli 18.
Free the Fae being cast on the end step here, just more fuel for the graveyard and able to find more gas here, as I believe that is a negate and a phantom interference.
Oh
So
boy.
suddenly Eli is getting the backup to the backups of protection for the support Oculus and ensuring that you're able to continue getting value out of it from additional turns.
Holy cow, that is a strong hand that Eli has constructed for himself, able to protect this Oculus and indeed the rest of this board. Little crimped, possibly on mana, but he found a land for the turn, so we're okay. In comes the Oculus, blocked by a flyer.
Yeah, Austin just trying to keep that life total in a reasonable position, and now back onto Austin's upkeep means another Manifest Dread.
Oculus has now manifested dread twice here, uninterrupted from Austin. Something very cool is the Manifest Dread mechanic, which was introduced with Duskmourn House of Horror, and what an upgrade it was just to plain old Manifest, Monty.
Yeah, I love Manifest Dread. It is one of the reasons, among many really, that I thought Duskmourn Limited was an absolute all-time great limited format. And it just gives you so much agency as a player, and it does so much.
Negate's going to deal with a Caretaker's Talent here. I'm going to take another look at the top of the deck here for Eli. I'm going to take an opt.
Cura Hottigen. Maybe not exactly what you're looking for, but 3 things going to the graveyard. At least you hit something, and you now have a choice if you have another one of those reanimation spells in hand, like Recommission or Helping Hand.
So choosing to negate that Caretaker's Talent, Monty, it wasn't a sweeper. Is it just as big of a threat?
It's the type of card that is sticky and gets on the board, and if Eli has an additional negate, I think that would lend a lot of reason for why you would go for something like that. Of course, you don't want Austin to get to a point where he's just getting so much card advantage turn after turn, and the Caretaker's Talent really does that with the Enduring Innocence also on the board.
Big attack there from Eli, blocked from Austin. Follow-up play, Chart, of course.
Chart, of course, one of my favorite draw spells of all time.
Oh, yeah.
Just because of it, it's not the best on rate. 2 for 2 is good, but it's the fact that the downside of you have to discard a lot of times is an upside for decks like this. Means that it's a card that you really have to think about when you're playing it, when you want to use it as a discard outlet, and when it is just pure card advantage, while also making you work for it.
Hottie Jin there off of Helping Hand from Eli, and just look at how he is churning through that deck. He's drawn and seen so many cards at this point.
Yeah, and I think this is a chance for Austin to go for a split up, hoping that it's Phantom Interference on the other side, but instead it is another negate, as perhaps Eli had really indicated when firing off that first negate against the Caretaker's Talent that there was a good chance he had a second one available to him.
So we are still all gas, no brakes here for Eli. The follow-up play there from Austin, just another Enduring Innocence.
Yeah, that's the nature of this Oculus deck, is between all of the draw and card selection spells that it has available to it, Moment of Truth, Picklock Prankster, Chart of Course, tends to never really run out of gas once things are rolling, and that makes the game really difficult for a deck like Mono White Tokens.
Here's another Free the Fae from Eli, giving him more looks, more cards. There's a Get Lost on the Sheep, which is now lost. Little Bo Peep knows something about that.
And I don't know how big this Haughty Jin is, but
It's enormous.
I think if it's a second Jin face down somehow, this would just be lethal.
And Austin's
I'm just guessing.
Austin's at 22, so like that's quite the statement, but it very well could be.
Yeah, I haven't exactly counted. I think
Oh,
we
here
are
we
going
go.
to get a count now.
13? Oh my God, Monty! There is the handshake.
If that was 13, then that's just lethal without flipping anything face up. That's 22 exactly.
Holy cow!
That is crazy.
That was a very fast feature match. Eli Swafford taking it down versus Austin Graham, 2-1.
Yeah. The previous rounds, we've just been talking about how resilient this Mono White Tokens deck looked, how awesome it was, but this is the type of deck that can really prey on it. This Mono White Tokens deck is built to beat up creature decks, right? We've seen it do that time and time again over the course of the weekend. But when you have a creature deck that has access to counter spells like this one, compare what just happened in this game to what happened to Devin O'Donnell in the previous round. Devin's interaction of Aven Interrupter and Invasion of Gobekon is good, but ultimately it's not exactly enough. Here, having access to Phantom Interference and Negate, you could see just how much of a difference that made. And yes, of course, it has to be said, Eli's draws were magnificent.
Yes,
Eli had absolutely incredible draws where he was able to consistently get an Oculus down on the board that wasn't answered, but it was also the fact that his deck was able to interrupt the game plan in a really efficient way.
Wow, that deck seemed sweet there, and we certainly saw it put on one of its best performances. I think that it is capable of, but like you mentioned, it has the tools to deal with something like Mono White Tokens and a more controlling strategy. Well, we have backup magic here for you from round number 11. Let's head on back on down to the feature match area. We have Scott McNamara up against Justin Kavanaugh. This is Dimir Enchantments versus Domain Control.
Yeah, this Dimir Enchantments list from Scott that I believe we saw yesterday is essentially a version of the Esper Pixie deck, just cutting the white and making what is a hybrid of Dimir midrange and Esper Pixie, trying to get the best of both worlds.
Looks like a Storm Chaser's talent on the table for Scott. Both of these players currently at 9-1, so doing very well here on day 2. The foil otters are back for Scott. Nice.
Yeah, this is something that me and Nick were really praising yesterday, was how different the Pixie and Enchantment style decks looked the games where they had the Storm Chaser's talent on turn 1 versus not. This card has been, in my opinion, the MVP of this style of deck, and it is the card that always got the job done when I would see them have it.
Yeah, it's like for Domain Control, having an Up the Beanstalk on 2 equals Storm Chaser's talent on 1 for Dimir Enchantments or Esper Pixie.
Yeah, and for Justin, you do see 2 of the cards that he would have already liked to have in the Overlord of the Hauntwoods, as well as the Up the Beanstalk in the graveyard, but does have a second copy of the Hauntwoods here, so is able to get that ramp going, and is so far not that much pressure being presented from Scott. So if Justin is able to continue building the board without feeling like he's being taxed, that would be the dream spot for the Domain Control player.
Flood Pit's Drowner flashed in, end of turn there for Scott McNamara. No target, but pressure, and Hopeless Nightmare is the play. Now, this is a card I had lots of questions about going into the weekend. Is it going to actually perform the way the Pixie players want it to?
Yeah, definitely it is a card that, in these types of strategies that are built around it, it can be extremely powerful. You saw the swing that turn of getting a prowess trigger and a card and 2 life out of Justin, but you do need to be really abusing it by bouncing it multiple times and getting that advantage time and time again.
Right, playing it once is not going to get the job done. Justin Kavanaugh, though, down to 13 now after that attack and the play of Hopeless Nightmare and being forced to discard.
Is it Zur? It is not.
Oh, it's not, sir. Dang.
But
But
it's pretty good.
it's a temporary lockdown, money.
Temporary Lockdown is excellent against this Dimir Enchantments and Pixie style deck because what this deck really does is go extremely wide on different card types. So, but they're all cheap. Lockdown being able to answer all of them is really nice.
This town ain't big enough manages to save a couple of enchantments there for Scott McNamara. Up the beanstalk, the follow-up play from Justin Kavanaugh. Hopeless Nightmare once again getting replayed here. Justin Kavanaugh going to be forced to discard and take 2. Down to 11.
Yeah, this town ain't big enough. Getting a lot of value still for Scott and allowing 2 of those permanents to dodge the temporary lockdown, that makes this rebuild possible.
Storm Chaser's talent hitting the table once again, bringing with it its otter friend. Here's Spyglass Siren, bringing a map token.
And board made again. So for Justin, another question being asked, and the big thing that Justin really needs right now is Zur. If Justin can find a Zur Eternal Schemer, things start looking really good.
Man, Zur is just so good, Monty. Anytime you draw it, you feel like a Grecian god.
I don't know what a Grecian god feels like, but you know what? I'm going to agree.
I think it's got to be pretty good. People praying to you and stuff.
Yeah, no.
You get to live on a mountain. You get to wear a hat
I do like mountains.
with gold leaves on it. Anyway, here's Overlord of the Mistmore.
You're selling me. Say more.
It's going to bring with it 2 of its flying friends as it's impending, and the clock is ticking down on this Overlord of the Hauntwoods 2. Plus, an Up the Beanstalk in play is just going to continue refilling Justin Kavanaugh's hand. So, Hopeless Nightmare, maybe not much of a nightmare in this specific matchup.
Yeah, it very much is the type of card that you're trying to prey on a deck that has limited resources, and that is not Domain Control. Domain Control feels like as long as you're not under a clock, you have unlimited resources because all of your cards just continue drawing more cards and leading into one another. These insect tokens are also excellent just because they do a great job of shutting down some of the attacks that your opponent can present.
There's a cut down on one of those. We're going to get a prowess trigger from the Otter. And into the red zone goes the Spyglass Siren and the Otter for Scott McNamara.
Yeah, Justin, being put to the test of, do you want to block this Otter and risk losing your insect to another prowess trigger, or do you want to risk taking the extra damage and just make the safe trade with the Spyglass Siren?
Opts to take the trade here. Otter gets in for 2. Justin down to 9 life. We're going to tick up our Spyglass. Oh. There, well, Leyline Binding says, I don't think so.
Yeah, Storm Chaser's talent tries to go to level 2, but Leyline Binding will respond and get rid of that and net a card in the process. And once again, the board is under control. The life total is decently high for Justin, and if Justin can, I'm going to keep saying it, land a Zur here, that would be great. If Justin can play an Overlord here, that would be great. There really is not many bad draws here for Justin.
Cavern of Souls, the land play here for Justin Kavanaugh. Overlord of the Hauntwoods coming off impending. Oh, she's here, and she's angry.
All right, so 1 creature now. That's a blocker for the Otter, and all this mana left up has to be somewhat concerning for Scott.
All right, Hopeless Nightmare number 2 hits the table. Justin, the tough choice is now on to you. Yeah, read it. Take a look. You're discarding. You're taking 2.
Yeah, I think the nightmare here for Justin would be a potential this town ain't big enough bouncing both of these hopeless nightmares, because Justin's life total is getting low and he hasn't found a card like Zur that would allow him to really get that life link and start recouping life.
Zur is really a get out of jail free card. Absolutely. Get lost here onto the Otter token, which always feels like, really? Am I get losting a 1/1? Yes, yes, you are. That's the power of the Otter in the enchantments deck.
All right.
3 mana.
Is it? It is.
It's our boy! Zur is here!
And Leyline Binding creature, Miss Moore's creature, 13 lifelink, and a lot of damage means that we are just done here.
Goodbye, Scott McNamara. That is game number 1 going to Justin Kavanaugh here on this domain control list. We're going to speed things up a little bit here in round number 11 to get through our sideboarding here.
Yeah, that was really just a classic showing from the domain control deck. Early game, you're not under
Oh,
that much
oh,
pressure.
oh.
You're able to develop. Mid game, you're just answering some things, and then late game, it just ends so easily.
Oh, absolutely. We've scooted things back here to get to the start of game number 2. And we're off. Spyglass Siren, the play for Scott McNamara.
Yeah, off to a good start, but not as good as you would like to see from, as I mentioned, that Storm
you want
Chaser's
that
talent.
talent.
So not the best opening, but it is still a turn 1 play, which is the baseline requirement for you.
Hey, I'll take it. I won't kick the Siren out for eating crackers in bed, you know what I mean?
That's how you get ants, Maria.
Yeah, which we do actually have some crawling around our desk here in Atlanta. Not something I'm used to being from Minnesota, but okay. In January. We've got a Flood Pits Drowner for Scott there. Just playing it purely for attack value.
Yeah, this is not the type of card that you're trying to get tempo value out of in terms of the tap against domain control. You are trying to get aggressive.
Here's Duress from Scott. And we're going to respond by going and getting a land from Justin. Herd Migration, gaining 3 life.
Yeah, no turn 2 up the beanstalk, so no dream being lived out for Justin, but still able to get some value and recoup some life from the Herd Migration. And assuming this can lead to an Overlord of the Hauntwoods, that will still get the ramp and resources going for Justin Kavanaugh.
All right, let's take a look at the hand here for Justin. We're taking that temporary lockdown. Goodbye.
But there's the 1-2 punch. Overlord of the Hauntwoods on turn 2. Turn 3, excuse me. That'll create an Everywhere token, assuming it resolves. And then Justin can just use that to lead into Overlord of the Flood Pits on turn 4, thanks to the ramp ability.
What's your favorite Overlord, Monty?
It's got to be Miss S'mores.
Absolutely.
Look, I love Hauntwoods. I love everything Hauntwoods does for this deck. But in terms of pure, raw value and cultural impact, in all formats, it has to be the Overlord of the Mistmores.
That's the correct answer. What about Overlord of the Boiler Bilges, though?
Okay, so Boiler Bilges is really cool, but it feels like one of those. I just want a spicy one. I play a spicy one of Over Bilges in my mod in my Pioneer domain deck, and that feels fun.
Man, if Zer's around, that thing can just kill anything. Death Touch. All right, there comes the Overlord of the Hauntwoods, bringing the Everywhere land for Justin Kavanaugh, who is sitting at 18 life. Here comes another attack from Scott for 4. 14 for Kavanaugh.
14 is not that low. And Scott needs to be able to do something about this Overlord of the Flood Pits that is coming down the next turn.
No play there from Scott. Back over to Justin.
Now, one thing that is important is Scott did add a Soulstone Sanctuary to the board there, and does have the mana to make it a creature at the end step. Soulstone Sanctuary, one of the unique creature lands. We've seen this type of land before, but not for a very long time, where once you make it a creature, it is a creature permanently. It is a big mana investment, but once you've turned it into a creature, you are able to really get aggressive with it.
All right, there's the other Overlord of the Flood Pits that we knew that was in Justin's hand. Nice way to draw some extra cards, smooth out your hand, take down the Overlord of the Hauntwoods.
All right, this is a cool play here from Scott. On the end step, goes this town ain't big enough on the Overlord of the Hauntwoods and his own Flood Pits Drowner, and then able to play the Drowner again in order to tap and put a stun counter on the Overlord of the Flood Pits without sacrificing any of his pressure.
Nice. Great tempo play here from Scott, who's going to get in for another 4. Justin knocked down to 10. Stun counter comes off the Flood Pits. Draw.
Now, that play does lead to Justin's ability to redeploy the Overlord of the Hauntwoods, this time as just a creature rather than impending. So we'll see if Scott has an answer to it on the second time it's coming down. But as things stand, it is still a lot of pressure mounting up from Scott. Justin is down to 10, and that is a life total that is starting to get precarious. Obviously, this Dimir enchantment deck doesn't have as much burst as you would typically expect, but because this is a hybrid of the Pixie and Dimir midrange decks, it does have access to an Enduring Curiosity, for example,
Sure.
which is 4 more flash power that could be added to this board on the end step.
You always got to think about the cat. Always could jump on in and ruin your day if you're Justin Kavanaugh. Let's see what's going to happen. Sunfall, the play. Any response from Scott? Let's find out.
Maybe just this town and bigging up both of your creatures.
Yep.
Yep.
There it is. Both
Congratulations, you played yourself.
Goodbye to your own creature. Mine, they're fine.
And Flood Pistrander can just come back down
Yeah.
again.
Oh, sick.
And 2 power still presented.
All right. So we are still being able to chip away at the life total of Justin Kavanaugh. Like you mentioned, Drowner back in. Incubator token only on 1. Sad. Hashtag sad.
Hashtag sad. Hashtag you hate to see it.
And here's going to be the Spyglass Siren potentially. Looked like Scott was tapping for it, rethinking here.
Yeah, there definitely is an incentive here, but also you could just fire up the Soulstone Sanctuary and attack for 5.
Yeah.
That's half of your opponent's life total gone if you so wish to do.
All right, so we're just going to get in for 2. Justin down to 8. Spyglass Siren coming back, hitting the table again, bringing its map token with it.
Yeah, the reason to play the Siren pre-combat is if you're going to activate the map token on it. But if you want to spread out your damage, or if you want to preserve enough mana to be able to fire up the Soulstone Sanctuary, then post-combat you can get more information out of it.
Yeah, those map tokens being sorcery speed is a real bummer sometimes, man.
Yeah, but it's also a necessary measure. I really don't
Yeah,
think
it'd be
that
pretty
you
bad
could,
otherwise.
I don't think you could allow people to just float all this mana and make all these decisions at instant speed. Now, notably, Scott doesn't have the mana to activate Soulstone Sanctuary anymore, but did add a Restless Reef to the board, so that is another creature land that represents a lot of power here.
Obstinate Baloth here was the attempted play from Justin Kavanaugh.
And that was told to get out.
Get out, my friend. Excellent get out there from Scott.
No life gain, and now this isn't a lethal attack because that Incubate token can get in the way, but you can see Justin's life total really falling low here.
All right, now we'll see if we activate that Sanctuary or not from Scott McNamara. Tapping 4 mana, and there it comes, alive. It's a 3/3 with Vigilance. Get in there. Boom.
Yeah, 2 vigilant creatures and 1 without. And here they come as Justin can fire up this Incubate token, get in front of the Floodpit Drowner, but still taking 5 in that case. And that's assuming Scott doesn't have something like a cut down here to clear the way and just push all of the damage through.
All right, there we go. We activated the Incubator token, jumps in front of the Drowner, taking 5 down to 3 goes Justin Kavanaugh. All right, we need an answer, buddy.
We need multiple, because even if you answer this board, there is still a Restless Reef on the other side that will get the job done. So Justin needs something like exactly another Sunfall, for example, and then 2 mana to be able to activate the Incubate token after the fact.
Here we go. It's an Overlord of the Mistmoors is the play for Justin Kavanaugh, coming in with those 2/1 flying insect tokens.
Technically alive.
All right.
Assuming Scott has nothing.
It's my favorite kind of alive.
That is 2 blockers and 2 damage being taken down to 1. And in Scott's position, I think you are pretty committed to just presenting damage as much as possible each turn.
Well, we're going to go the safe route here and Duress first. See what we're up against.
Justin may be thinking about a Get Lost here, if he has available, sending that at the Soulstone Sanctuary, perhaps.
Ooh, check out this hand.
That is a copy of Leyline Binding, of course. But it is also a copy of Seized from Slumber. So having access to both of those, Seized is the choice, as that is the one that can target lands. Leyline Binding will have to go after the Siren, but now you have to still double chump. So not ideal, you just get to prevent yourself from taking the damage and hope that this is Azura off the top.
Justin has bought himself enough time to live another turn here. Let's see what the play is. Can he stay alive? Overlord of the Hauntwoods just being straight up cast. Back over to Scott. Animate the land, attack you, you're dead.
That'll do it.
Tying things up. One game apiece. Scott McNamara and Justin Kavanaugh here in round number 11. We're going to speed things up once again. We have the technology. We can build him stronger. Here we go. Game number 3. We are the new Time Lords. Square into the yard. All right, turn 1. There we go. Monty, just like you drew it up, Otter comes into play.
Yeah, but this time Justin has his own best early play, and that is the Up the Beanstalk. So what we saw the previous game where Justin was starting to run out of cards and resources there, going to be less of an issue this game. And that is not what Scott wants to see, as if Justin has the dream curve of Up the Beanstalk into Overlord of the Hauntwoods, that is going to be devastating.
All right, here comes Spy of Glass Siren down on the table for Scott McNamara. Justin at 19 after an attack from that Otter. Who would win? One Beanstalk or one Storm Chasey Boy? Guess we're about to find out here in game number 3, the deciding game between these two in round 11. 3 mana. We're going to lock down. Oh, and also my Beanstalk, though.
Yeah, you hate locking down your own Up the Beanstalk, but that very cleanly answers everything Scott has done so far, and now there is a big onus on Scott to rebuild.
Okay, we've got another Storm Chaser's talent. Another Otter comes back into play, but that is not got to feel good if you're in Scott McNamara's seat.
Now, there is one issue for Justin, which is the current mana base of Plains, Lush Portico, until that Cavern of Souls came down, meant that Justin did not have access to an Overlord of the Hauntwoods.
Another Up the Beanstalk attempts to be cast. No, says Scott McNamara with a negate, taking care of that very pesky enchantment. Otter getting in for another 1. Kavanaugh to 18.
Yeah, the lack of pressure that Scott has had this game relative to the previous games is very showing. However, Kaido is a great addition to the board now.
Yeah, Kaido Bane of Nightmares joins the team for McNamara here. We're going to 0 to take a look at some cards and draw one. Back over to Kavanaugh.
All right, do you have an Overlord? Do you have something to do here that will really counter the pressure that Scott has now put out with this Kaido?
How good is Kaido right here, Monty?
Kaido is looking really good, especially because if your opponent wants to answer it with something like a Leyline Binding, it is going to take their entire turn because Overlord of the Hauntwoods, has not come out yet. There's only 2 land types on that board.
Wow, 2 land types in a 5 or 4 color deck. It's not going to feel good.
Well, this is the nature of the new, I don't want to say modern because, that is its own format, but the new domain control deck is essentially a green-white deck. You are getting domain more often than not from the Everywhere token that Overlord of the Hauntwoods creates.
An attack from both Kaido and the Otter sends Kavanaugh down to 14. We're going to once again 0 here to take a look at 2, draw 1. So Scott continuing to build advantage here over Justin Kavanaugh while his threats remain unanswered. Fear of Isolation is going to bounce back that Storm Chaser's talent to hand.
Yeah, and the pressure is now mounting because Justin hasn't really been able to get anything going. The first Up the Beanstalk that he played, he had to exile to his own temporary lockdown. The second one, he had to got countered, and now he has to use the Cease from Slumber, but can't use it on a Kaido because of the hexproof on Scott's turn and it not being a creature on Justin's turn.
That's rough. Had to just deal with the Otter token instead of the much bigger, juicier threat of Kaido. Justin Kavanaugh here up against it pressure-wise. Finally, Overlord of the Hauntwoods makes an appearance a little bit late to the party, but hey, we'll take it. Oh, but get out is the answer from Scott. We will not be exploring the Hauntwoods tonight.
Yeah, and I'm really curious. It seems like that is a Cavern of Souls, but he must have not named one of the types of the Overlord's avatar.
Oh, that's a great point.
He must have used it for Zur.
For Wizard.
That means that it is counterable. So I'm not sure about that decision from Justin and why it led to it. Probably because has Azure in hand, but hasn't had the mana to cast it up to this point, and that is a really big issue.
All right, so we're going to plus Kaido here, give our ninjas +1/+1, and we're going to activate the Soulstone Sanctuary for an enormous attack here from Scott McNamara.
Yeah, and for Justin, he is running out of time.
Down to 4 life. Huge draw needed here from Justin. So many threats on Scott's side of the battlefield.
And 4 is an important number because even if Justin was to get out here, Scott would be able to win through. Sorry, excuse me, not get out. Sunfall here, Scott would be able to win through it using the Kaido and the Restless Reef. But as things stand, Herd Migration going to try to stabilize the board, but I don't think it's going to be enough.
It is not enough. That is Scott McNamara taking down the game against Justin Kavanaugh there.